From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. Hey everyone, just a quick note before starting today's show. If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to personally invite you to become a member of a budding community on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests, chat about things we've already heard, and gain access to some show swag. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. I'd love for you to join me. Okay, on with today's show. Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelts as we journey through the thrilling life of a woman who has broken barriers and shattered ceilings. Today, I present to you Melanie Curtis, a world record skydiver, the driving force behind the Highlight Pro Skydiving team, and the executive director of the Women's Skydiving Network. Not just content with skydiving accolades, Melanie is a fearless risk-taker. She traded the comfort of a regular job to chase her dream, first as a professional skydiver, and then transitioning into a sought-after life coach, a published author, and a charismatic speaker. With 12,000-plus jumps under her belt, Melanie's achievements in skydiving are unparalleled. Aside from being a competitor and owner of world records, esteemed publications such as Forbes, Fast Company, and Thrive Global have recognized her prowess, cementing her status in both personal and professional development spheres. Her zeal for skydiving goes hand in hand with her talent as a life coach. Melanie is not just teaching jumps, but also peak performance, building genuine relationships, and harnessing the true essence of personal freedom. Beyond the clouds and the adrenaline, she has touched and transformed countless lives, guiding many towards self-growth and empowerment. Melanie's journey is more than just about records and accolades. It's about passion, unwavering dedication, and the relentless pursuit of pushing human potential to its limits. Welcome to the 20-Minute Call, Melanie Curtis.
I'm here. We're doing it. This is happening. My beautiful friend. I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Mel Curtis, thank you for being on my program and for tolerating my you're kind of an old pro at this podcasting thing. So thanks for joining me. I want to start where it began for you and I. And I have this little picture in my old rusty colored Honda. What was that cube thing? The square Honda. And I just hired you to be a load organizer for Carolina Fest. And there's a picture of us from that time. And we're both bright-eyed. We're bushy-tailed. We're going to conquer the world.
And we did, baby.
And we did.
No, I love that picture. I joke that we look 12 years old in that picture. I use that picture in some of my talks, my speaking engagements, to illuminate long-term relationships and how powerful and important and adorable we used to be, but really how far we can come when we really care about our people. Like, that's one thing that you and I have from the start aligned around, is people caring, really having love lead, you know?
I've often looked at you and I as sort of in parallel in a way that we're on our own tracks, trying to do a thing. It's been very fun to watch you do your thing. You know, I've enjoyed doing my thing. I'm happy. But before we get to all that, a lot of people that are listening, or if they have a pulse and social media, know of who you are. But I want to know, like, before I met Mel Curtis, at Carolina Fest, I'm thinking 15 years ago. What was little Melanie Curtis like? What were you like as a kid?
Oh, it's so funny because I feel like I've always been this interesting yin yang of this very anxious young girl who had a lot of anxieties, a lot of insecurities, coupled with being that person who would take any role in the school play and slide tackle someone with relentless intensity on the soccer field and would leap off the stage for some other thing. Like there were so many interesting things in my high school. I was very much a high achiever, very much also a people pleaser, so it's this dichotomy of recognizing your capability while also being trapped by it. You know what I mean? So I say this a lot relative to my own healing journey, my own growth as a person, why I was called to skydiving, why I was called to all the other things that I've done, is that I feel like I needed deeply to go right at fear in order to be able to not be trapped by it and live a really small life. I don't know if that makes sense, but like I feel like I would have easily lived a small life if I didn't find ways to access that potential and like go toward it. And for some reason, I always did, despite how I felt inside. I don't know if that resonates for you.
I don't think I had the self-awareness when I was, as my friends say, little Jimmy, when I was little James. Mel, I'd say you were advanced than me because I didn't know if I was coming or going.
Oh, no, I didn't have the awareness. I didn't have the awareness then. I only have the awareness now.
Sure. Okay.
Looking back and sort of dissecting my young life. But yeah, oh my God, I was just like any other kid.
Were you a theater kid?
Really sort of, I was, but it was more that I was into everything. One of my goals in high school was to have the longest paragraph in the yearbook so I just did everything. I was voted best all around in the yearbook. I just did all these things and I did everything quite well, except I sucked at basketball. I don't know why. I was a great practice player. I for some reason was not good on the court for basketball.
I promise you that I am a worse basketball player than you. I am the worst.
Cool.
It's not good. So do you have brothers? You have siblings?
But high achiever. Super high achiever. Yeah, my brother. I have an older brother. His name is Matt. I absolutely idolized him growing up. My mom used to call me his best audience, which, by the way, I'm 45 years old now. Nothing has changed. My brother is still like so hilarious to me. We're very close. I also have a stepsister, Andre. She's wonderful. She and I grew up as sisters, so I don't really even think of her as my stepsister. She's my sister. And the funny thing is that we're not blood related at all, but we look so much alike, whereas I don't even look like Matt at all. So it's just like I've really lucked out as it relates to family and siblings. I know not everyone is as lucky, and I'm very grateful, and I care deeply to maintain and nurture and lean into the relationships that I have with my family, both my parents and my siblings.
That's very evident in what you share online whenever you spend time with your family. Where are you originally from?
I'm from upstate New York. Yep. My dad had an airport at our house.
So tell me about that. I've seen this where your dad has an airport at his house. You were jumping at a very young age. Was your dad a skydiver? Make me make sense of this.
Yeah, my dad's a pilot, and he was flying really as a young person. And I had my first flight when I was 3 months old and was I grew up around aviation. You know, my parents got divorced when I was really young, so I didn't live with my dad. But anytime I visited him, I was exposed to this aviation life. Then my dad and his best friend, who was a skydiver, they were like, let's open a drop zone at the house. And they did. And then the rest of my sort of, you know, young preteen, teenage years included going to the drop zone. I sat in the first jump course many, many times.
So we're not saying going to the drop zone dad's house. We're not saying drop zone dad's house. You're talking to a drop zone. What drop zone was that?
No, I'm talking about my dad's house, which was a drop zone.
Oh, for real?
It's called the called the Verona Skydiving Center. So it's not in operation anymore. The airfield is still there, so it's Curtis Airfield. My dad flies small Bushcat, like ultralight type aircraft out of there all the time now still. I jumped there the other day, just sort of kind of bandit jump. But I mean, it's always open for skydiving. So it's a legal jump, but it's like feels, because there's no real skydiving going on there anymore. And my dad just has a 2-seater, and I squished myself in there and rolled out at 3,500 feet.
That's so cool. So how old were you when you made your first jump?
I was 18. Yeah, I was afraid to jump before that. I could have jumped when I was 16, but I just wasn't ready. I really just wasn't ready. I was just too afraid. You know what I mean? I was just too afraid. And then I tell this story a lot where one day I just got sick of feeling like that. And I also, it's again, that dichotomy of feeling, that dichotomy of emotion where I was both afraid and sick of being afraid. So it was kind of like a fuck it, I'm going to do it. And it was like, oh, I also want to. I'm also very curious. What's it like? Everyone else is, you know, like really curious to have the experience as well. And then for me, I was one and done. Absolutely, fundamentally altered. First jump, as soon as I did that first jump, every decision in my adult life was made to include skydiving in my life after that point.
So you landed one and done, and it's hard for me to imagine that, knowing what we know today.
One and done meaning I had decided that this is what I'm going to do. Not one and done, I'm not going to go skydiving anymore. One and done, everything is about skydiving from here on out.
Oh, wow, the opposite, okay. Wow, so it hit you so hard.
Yes.
That's wild. So I know you went to Middlebury, is that right? Mm-hmm. College?
Yeah.
And were you skydiving through the time in college too?
Yeah. So I went to Middlebury, and there was a drop zone, Vermont Skydiving Adventures, close to Middlebury. And I did a couple of static line jumps there. I did like a clear and pull 6-second delay, and I failed, or a 10-second delay, and I failed it because I only delayed 6 seconds because I was freaking out. I mean, it's what happens, you know, you're falling away. You don't have a static line anymore. I learned on static line. And so, yeah, when you start to do those clear and pulls where you're actually in free fall, it's freaking scary, man. I feel like my first jump was really scary, but my first actual like clear and pull free fall jump where I'm like, I have to do this. The line attached to the airplane is not going to do it for me. I have to do it. That was a really scary jump for me, as well as the jump where I jumped my first pack job where nobody watched. That was also a really scary jump for me for some reason.
Yes, I also remember that as being a very scary jump for sure. It's funny, you talk about fear. Like when I think of early Mel in knowing you when you were at Skydive Elsinore, and I sort of have a note here where you became known as Melsinore, and it took like over a decade for that name to drop. But how is it you got out to Skydive Elsinore from upstate New York? What was the connection there?
I was very much on the traditional path at first. Even though I started skydiving when I was 18, even though I was fundamentally altered in my psyche, which, again, by the way, I only can speak about it like that now after deep self-reflection and actual contemplation around my life and the impacts of things that I've chosen to do, skydiving being a major thing. Well, what else did that impact? How else did that impact my life? What else did that make possible for me? Because now, of course, that's what I'm doing in large part as a leader in sport and out of our sport, is talking about that type of stuff, extracting insight. So I went to Middlebury for full 4 years, really cared still about getting a solid education. That said, I did my study abroad year in Australia because it was English speaking, sunny, and I called ahead and I booked my AFF level 5 to start my skydiving training as soon as I got there. And it was a pass-fail thing. So I basically went to Australia, did my schooling, but I was allowed, and the structure of the education there let me really center my life there around skydiving. And I ended up coming home with about 110, 115 jumps. After, working a job, I rode my bike at 5 a.m. to some diet place where this skydiver friend hired me to pack food bags for people who bought the meal plan. And I rode there an hour at 5 a.m, got there at 6 a.m, packed a bunch of bags, rode back, went to class. And that's how I made even any money to do any jumps. I mean, because I was still renting gear. I was still a student. Student jumps are expensive. I would eat canned beans and canned spaghetti. I ate the diet place didn't put bread crusts in the bags. And so I took all the bread crusts. I was like, free food, cool. Like, I did anything I could to make my skydiving possible. And I think about that now and I go, I vaguely remember a group project report that I did for one of my classes, which maybe was about archaeology. I don't know. But what I really remember, of course, is that life, that energy, that power that I had in me to do this thing that was very deeply and rigorously calling me. Listen, there's a lot where that can go wrong. So I'm not saying, oh, that's so inspirational, #life coach. There's a lot there, but when we're old enough or when we're mindful enough to direct that type of energy, when we tap into it, there's a lot of power there. And it's like, that's why I've become a successful person in the sport, is that life force. I always was able to really direct it and not let it be derailed by people that might try.
Before I move off of this, where were you jumping in Australia? Because I'm sure everyone wants to know.
Yeah, I jumped at the Coral Sea Skydiver. So Richard Pym, his drop zone in Ayr, AYR, in North Queensland. Yeah, so anyway, you asked about Elsinore. I didn't even go there. But I finished college, and then I got a job in New York City, my favorite city. I moved there with my college boyfriend. We had, separate places, but kind of lived sort of in the same building. It was like a whole thing. Made a lot of money. I mean, I didn't make that much money my first 2 years in New York, but I ended up getting with a boss who I made a lot more money with, who I knew he knew I wanted to move to California because I was like ready to quit my job because I'm like, I can't really skydive in New York. I'm not making enough money. I need to figure this out. I went to the ranch when I could. I mooched rides before Facebook and cell phones. I opened up the physical copy of the ranch roundup and I looked and I called people's phone numbers, just alphabetical. One of my very best friends, Stephen Baker, to this day, he's the one who answered the phone when I was like, hey, can I get a ride from the city? And he was like, no, but catch this train to this bus to this taxi and I'll pick you up. And that's just how it happened back then,
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. Burble. So you get to Elsinore, which is sort of when you became in my radar. And what I can't define, Mel, is what was it that you did at Skydive Elsinore that suddenly you became so prevalent in sort of the skydiving consciousness?
Oh, thank you for that. I mean, Melsinore. Melsinore. I have such love in my heart for that girl, for that woman, for that person, for that teammate, for that, radiant ball of light. You know what I mean? I have real and true deep gratitude for that time in my life, for all of my friends that I know and that I met there. It is a wonderful thing to see those connections still be rich with love and kindness, even now, many, many years later. But to answer your question, I say this and it sounds hokey, but it is true, is that it was fueled, wildly fueled by love. I loved what I was doing. I loved every single day that I got to go to the drop zone. I loved that I had avenues for what I was excited to do, which at the time was 4-way belly competition team training. I loved that. I loved that there was a community there. I loved that I had an avenue to potentially start helping people, right? I was the new jumper and I got to grow up there. You know what I mean? Andy Melchiotti is one of my close friends, and we often think about that and we talk about that. We grew up together, as it were, in skydiving. And that's a very, very special time. It wasn't just me. I certainly honor and I acknowledge all that I uniquely brought, which was just this real light and love and energy. And I was an unstoppable force, James. I don't know how to even else describe it.
You were.
But it also was everyone else that was there. Yeah, it was also Jonathan, it was Andy, it was Lou, it was Steve, it was Maylee, it was all these other people too that were a part of this amazing time in our skydiving life, but I also think in skydiving history, because really before us, and I'm not trying to say nobody else was doing this, but this very, very clearly happened in our culture at Elsinore, is it started where it was, free flyers don't talk to the belly flyers. They're cool, they're uncool, they're this, they're that. The Sky God thing was still around. The exclusionary clique thing was still around. And by the time we all sort of went on to our next levels and next chapters in our lives and skydiving lives, that was gone. It was all and truly was about loving people, being inclusive, welcoming them. I always get made fun of, but it was very honest for me to walk across the drop zone, see someone I didn't know. Who's that person that I've never seen before? I'd walk right over to them, hand outstretched, and be like, "Hey, I'm Mel. Welcome. What's your name? What are you looking for?" That was. It was very true for me to do that. It wasn't something I had to try to do, even though I had to be intentional about it. Does that make sense?
100%. Going back to that time when I was looking for load organizers and trying to build what was Carolina Fest, I was not interested in resume. I was interested in who you are as a person to say, "Oh, you've got 50 jumps?
Yeah.
Let's go jump."
Yes.
Not the typical Sky God attitude of, "Oh, you only have 50 jumps.
Mm-hmm.
You need to go over there." It was because of that attitude I was like, "Oh, I got to have Mel Curtis."
Aww.
So, yeah, and you were a force. I remember that so very well. Something that you said is, "Oh, that girl," as you reflect on yourself, that girl, as if that girl is a different person. Explain that to me.
Oh, God, how many hours you got, my friend? I think a big part of what skydiving has done for me is, and this is only one thing, because skydiving has done a lot of things for me. That's why I call it a great, great love of my life, and it is. It's one of the great loves of my life, is that I think it opens the door for people to access versions of themselves they didn't know were possible. And then, inevitably, they have a breakdown with that experience. So we find skydiving, at least this was what happened for me, find skydiving and you're so passionately in love with it. And then you start to, even me, it took me a while to reach this point, by the way, because it was just like, there's a multitude of different stories that I had along the way that were challenges. But if I talk about the idea of this is my life's happiness, and then, oh, wait, I'm not as happy as I was, or this isn't happening and I wanted it to, or you start to become disillusioned with your experience in skydiving. Why I say that's a really great thing is that then forces us into the next level of growth and healing. And so that's when we have to, and we are invited to, go deeper and go, oh, if it wasn't skydiving, well, what did skydiving bring me? Well, what is skydiving not fulfilling for me anymore? And start to ask those questions. Like, this is the whole reason I'm a life coach, is that I deeply love people, which again shows up even in my younger, more unconscious life at Skydive Elsinore as Melsinore. And it shows up in my calling to hold these safe containers for people to explore these questions that are really challenging, that are emotionally challenging. When we meet and we go, oh, what I thought was happiness isn't happiness, we got to reckon with ourselves. And that is really scary, hard work. And we need safe containers. We need safe people, professionals, or not, in order to be able to explore that. And so that's what skydiving got me to. You know what I mean? And so I had to. Obviously, I've had other breakdowns in my life. I've had, the usual horrifying male-dominated woman in the sport experienced assault. I have been divorced. I have worked in the sport. I've traveled and deeply exhausted myself. Like, there are so many things that have been deeply challenging about my experience. But what that has done is it has invited me into healing, into growth, and that has opened up what you're seeing now in my life, which is, holy shit, you can't think any of this up.
You and I haven't sat down and had a deep conversation in a while. And, the beauty of a good friendship is you pick right up. But in my observation of you and listening to episodes of Trust the Journey, your podcast with Jay Maletsky, is there's almost this incredible freedom that's been generated by self-exploration, like looking at self.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, it seemed like I have this picture in my head of Mel Curtis with her. There's a few pictures of you with arm up, conquering. I'm driving. I'm moving forward. Come with me. Let's go. But now it's like arm down. Let me look at myself in the mirror. Do I like what I see?
Yeah.
What do I not like? Mm-hmm. That's the vibe I've been getting. Am I close to that?
Yeah. And I believe deeply in modeling, right? If I want people to, like, what I believe is the most powerful leadership is actually leading by example, right? If I think growth and healing is something I want to be standing for, I got to be doing the work. You know what I mean? It's just like if I want a culture at a drop zone to be inclusive and kind and welcoming, I got to be those things. You know what I mean? That's why I said things aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily things I'm not going to do, but I also bring intention. I'm highly intentional. I'm a highly intentional person. You know what I mean? Like, I hire my own coaches. Like, I mean, Trust the Journey, people can listen to that for sure, but we talk at length about our healing journeys. We talk about our work with plant medicines and psychedelic ceremonial healing, which is very important to me. I'm a passionate public advocate for the legalization, the safe access and equitable access to these medicines. It's transformed my life, the willingness for me to really bravely look at myself with the proper support and tools. And so, yeah, you can do that in a life coaching space. You can do that in a friendship. You can do that in a ceremony with medicine. You can do it in a community that has shared values. So there's lots of different ways to be safely held in order to look at oneself. And there's also tons of tools in the world that we can seek to learn. You know what I mean? I'm a lifelong learner. I'm voracious for podcasts, for Audible books, for a client has an issue that I don't know about. I am instantly learning about that thing. I love that. I am just so energized for that. And that's partly why I'm such a great teammate in that type of role, but it also elevates me. It also invites me into similar questions that my clients are asking themselves. You know what I mean? I also believe that I can't be and cannot reach my full potential, as it were, which sounds so buzzwordy and whatever. But in all my experience healing, it's obvious to me with each layer that I peel back, with each like deep root of like poisonous old thinking that I pull out of myself, the next level of what I can do and how I can contribute and what I can create is available to me. It's the only way. My whole life has transformed because of it. All my relationships, all of it.
Forgive me, I'm going to go back a second, and the question I'm going to ask is not to be sounding dumb. Okay, it's just
sure.
My understanding. You reference healing journey. What does healing journey mean?
Yeah, good question.
And why did you decide that you needed to be on a healing journey? Like, where did that? You know what I mean? Let's one at a time.
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, why I decided I needed to be on a healing journey is because I was in pain. You know, like I laugh about it, but it's as simple as that, right? And I say this now a lot, and this is for sort of the more type A high achiever, the, you know, people with their arm in the air, the I'm going to lean into my strong suits, I'm going to control and I'm going to execute and I'm going to make things happen. I have all of those type A skills, and for a long time they were my prison. They kept me from my really soft, vulnerable center, right? Because I never really looked there. I never needed to either, right? Because life hadn't delivered me a blow that fucked that up enough, right? To shatter that armor that I was living within. And so I'm not trying to not share specific stories, but I think that metaphor is important for people to resonate around. Is that how you operate? The biggest thing about healing, and the like thing that is the worst thing about it, is that we are not the worst thing, but we don't think we need it until life forces us into a scenario where we are in so much pain that we have to start to look at things that we were unwilling to look at before. So I think about my periods of deep heartbreak. So I was in deep heartbreak, both from divorcing, but also from death of friends. I also was deeply, deeply burned out from skydiving. I was traveling. I had the dream job. I was living the dream. I was traveling internationally, getting to go to all these events, to Carolina Fest, to all kinds of drop zones around the country and world. And I would never trade that. I loved it. And because I was unconscious to myself, I deeply exhausted myself doing that because I didn't understand boundaries. I didn't understand how to advocate for myself. I didn't have certain skills that are necessary to care for that soft person inside of myself, right? So only when that armor was blown off because of life was I forced into going, oh, this healing thing, I guess I should get into therapy. Oh, I guess I should maybe talk to my friends more deeply. Oh, maybe I should sleep more. Maybe I should read more books about what I'm going through because I don't fucking know what's happening here. Right? So like those types of experiences force us into healing. But this is where I think there's a powerful invitation, is that if you're a person going, I'm good, I don't need healing, I'm not saying you're heading for some big breakdown and some big horrible time in your life, but I am suggesting that healing can be an approach to life. Like we can make that a thing that we do, not just something that we do when we're in a major breakdown.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, who doesn't need to be on a healing journey? Everyone has hurts. We're all carrying around. And something that triggered to me that you said from the beginning was, I was a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And that resonates because I'm a people pleaser. I want everyone to be happy. And in my business, I don't want anyone to be unhappy, whether it be my employees or my clients. And there's limits to that.
Yeah.
Something also, you talk about you are a big advocate for plant medicines. And I am of the generation of Nancy Reagan, don't do drugs. And,
Me too, man.
all of that. I know, we're the same age. Because of my ignorance about it, I'm intimidated about it. How did you first get introduced to that? And it's almost like, by the way, like, I don't know what it is, but the word ayahuasca is I'm hearing it everywhere, right? So, and that's part of sort of that plant medicine world. So I'm just curious. Teach me the ways, Yoda. How did you come into this?
Oh, gosh, that's funny. In no way am I an expert in this field in any way. I have thought about this, right? Because Jay and I have the podcast. He's also a passionate advocate. For anybody who listens to our show, they'll hear that. We made a very conscious decision, I don't know, probably 3 years ago, 3.5, 4, to start to speak publicly about our work with these medicines because they have helped so many people. And listen, there are plenty of things you have to learn. So I'm not a facilitator. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a scientist. I'm like, if I want to be in service to these medicines, this movement, people, humanity to heal, what can I do? Well, I have a platform. I have a voice. I can use it and I can step forward and say what I think is true and what is real and true for me and my unique experience, which may or may not be true for you or others. But I can invite people into their own inquiry. I can invite people who are hearing the word ayahuasca all around them and are starting to have a curiosity. I can invite them into their own learning, right? I can send them resources. I can help people to continue to open their minds. To your point, I absolutely grew up in the era of Nancy Reagan, just say no to drugs. That was deeply embedded in my psyche. I saw the freaking egg in the frying pan. That scared the shit out of me. I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that egg thing. And so it speaks volumes, by the way. The fact that I was willing to challenge that, because I've been very, very, very much connected to that for a long, long time. And for me to challenge it spoke volumes about how much pain I was in, about what I was willing to do in order to hopefully find healing for the things that were challenging me. On the other side of the house, and this is a kind of a fun little story, and I want to tell it just because why not? We're here. I don't know if you remember the first time for you or if other people do, but I vividly remember the first time that I said the F word. I was 8 years old. I was at my friend Erin Carney's house up the hill from my house. We were outside, like by the barn, by the big tree. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I remember saying it. And when I said it, I was exhilarated. Like completely exhilarated. Like I just totally remember it. So stay with me, because this is going somewhere. Is that it's not just that, oh, I did something wrong or I broke the rules, but it kind of is. It was the first time that I did something that somebody else told me I couldn't do, right? And it was the first time I felt what that felt like. You know what I mean? And that is an important distinction, because if we're talking about being a leader, using our voice in the world to break the rules, to go against what society tells us we need to do and what we can't do or what we shouldn't do, we need a little bit of that rebel energy. You know what I mean? We need a little bit of that connection to, no, I'm going to trust what's true for me and my heart, what my body is telling me, and I'm going to step forward there, even though it's scary. So like that has been a real key pillar in my life also. And that's very present in how I serve as an activist, how I talk about women and equality and trying to change the culture of skydiving to one of emotional safety for everybody, right? Not just the male-dominated space that it's been for so long. And same thing about plant medicine. So it's really about trusting ourselves and then learning that we can step forward into these spaces we're told we're not allowed to be in.
And clearly, by doing that, you found something that agrees with you in plant medicine.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, and listen, James, it's not for everybody. There are definitely risks. You can't be on SSRIs. You can't be on antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds. It's really important that those are out of your body if you're ever going to try that. But how I found plant medicine and got to it, my best friend, Shannon, she owns a healing and retreat center called the Great Spirit Farm in Brooksville, Florida. And for years, she told me about her healing experiences with ayahuasca, with psilocybin, in these high-dose, sacredly held ceremonial experiences. This is not doing drugs. Anybody who has done a ceremony with an intention for healing knows that it is not always fun. For me, it has never been fun. It is hard work, because you are actually going into those dark corners that you can't see. You're pulling out your deepest fears. You're crying. You are puking. You are snotting. Like, this is a real rigorous medicine. That's why I say it's not for everyone, but I was afraid of it for so long, but only when my pain got to the point where I was like, and I trusted Shannon, and she was having all these amazing results. And Jay, he's another person. He was having these experiences that corroborated that this could maybe be something for me. That is what finally got me there. I did a psilocybin ceremony as my very first experience, and I did that for about a year and a half, like just a few ceremonies in a year and a half. And then I had another painful experience relative to my love relationships, which was the one thing that I was really working on. How can I heal my lifelong experience with anxious attachment? And that's what finally got me to try ayahuasca. And that, I've sat with ayahuasca 14 times, and it is undeniable the level of healing that you access. And for me, it's very brave. Not everybody feels that way. But for me, I have a deep, deep respect for what these medicines bring us. And anyway, I clearly could go on and on and on and on about this, but I'm writing my next book about it.
I think I represent a group in that I'm curious and I'm fearful. And not fearful from necessarily a bad experience, but fearful to go there. We all carry a level of shame or, just stuff we're not proud of or whatever. I think all of us as humans do. And to look at it, to me, is very courageous.
Yes.
And
yes,
sometimes I will say to those that know me well, it's like, I really want to row across the Atlantic Ocean in an experience that actually starts in Tenerife, in the Canary Islands, and actually finishes in Antigua. And part of that appeal is there's no hiding places. You're going to deal with yourself out there. Like, I kind of want, that attracts me to that. But to be sort of fearing of not being in control. There's a very funny story of me being in Amsterdam and having the worst marijuana experience. I just felt so out of control. Like, I was such a baby, Mel. I'm like, it was so bad. Anyway, it doesn't really agree. So, and that's not the same. But I've been interested and I'm learning, and I want to keep an open mind. So I'm sure my parents listen to this going, what's...
Yeah. And
I'm 40. I'm 45.
Listen,
I'm still a kid to my parents.
There's a lot of information out there. I mean, seriously, I have, just like I approach anything that really deeply matters to me, I dive in big. I have been learning a lot over the last 5 years about this. So again, I'm no expert. But what I can share is what I've learned, you know what I mean? And certainly, of course, from my own experiences. But yeah, it's understandable. I mean, how many people have said to me, like, oh my God, I don't want to find out that I was molested, and oh my God, I'm freaking, and like, I don't mean to make light of that at all, but like, that's a real fear. People are afraid of going, man, what if I was sexually abused? And then that'll just change the relationship I have with my parents or myself, or what will I find? What will I find in the dark recesses of my emotional body, of my psyche? It's a very understandably scary thing. The thing that I can say to that, and this is the thing that you only start to believe after you've sat with the medicine for a while, in my experience, again, this is only my experience, is that you start to really believe and learn and know that the medicine always gives you what you need and only gives you what you can handle. So you might feel like, if you agree to do a 3-day ayahuasca ceremony, for example, which is only the maximum number of days that I've done. There's other things that you can do with a multitude of days. I've never done that. That's never called to me. They say that the medicine calls to you, and when you're ready, you'll know. And every time, for me, that's absolutely been true. But you might feel, because it can be so rigorous, you might feel like, oh my God, there's no way I can handle this. It's just not true. I've come out of every 3-day experience I've ever had, amazed at how strong I am. It connects you to your capability in a different way, and that's outside of even the specificity of insight, right? Like, you have to listen to Trust the Journey in order to get all this. Well, I talk about my parents, my dad, my brother, my time I was made fun of in, the dance, and like there's so many little stories that tell us why we're so deeply afraid of humiliation, why we are anxiously attached, how we can heal that. There's hours and hours and hours of details that can come. And it's really only when you're ready, if you're ready. And again, if it's not for you, that's okay too.
Tell me if I'm correct or wrong, right? Mm-hmm. It feels like the Mel Curtis that I knew as Mel Senor and the Mel Curtis I know today, there is a very distinct difference. And what I feel like I hear is you are very confident, right? You are outspoken, comfortably outspoken, where maybe many others would be uncomfortable in saying something with as much confidence, or resting with, I am an influencer, or I am going to be a professional speaker, like it's definitive. And I wonder, does that come from like almost this level of enlightenment that is occurring by looking at your stuff and then going, I have freedom to be who I am because I like who I am because I've addressed my stuff. Am I right on saying that? Ish?
Yes, you are right. That's one component. The other component is that once you go through, it's like once you go through the dark night of the soul, you're like, fuck, I got this. I got this. It's more like, it's like that too. You know what I mean? Like, James, how long have you known me? And it's like, you've known me to be someone relentlessly putting myself out there, not because I want the likes. Yeah, that's nice. It's fine. I like the dopamine hits just like everyone else, but I more do it because it's not something that's easy for me. I think people look at me and they think it's easy, but it's because of, and listen, there's other reasons for this too, but when I read the book Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert, that book helped me so much feel less alone in the world because she shared her struggle as a human, as a writer, and I resonated so much with that story that I was like, that. When we are bravely, courageously self-expressed, that is our highest service to the world, and it's our avenue to our own contribution to ourselves as well. So that has been a premise for me, is that I believe in putting myself out there. I am being in service. You know what I mean? Like, there are plenty of days when I cuddle Mathilde and I watch Handmaid's Tale and I look ridiculous and I want to just putter and organize and be completely introverted. I am a quite introverted person these days, and I like that. But it's like, when I come out in the world, I believe it is in order to be honestly there, and that if we are honestly in the world, and that's the same thing is like, you can look at my Instagram feed, for example, and go, oh, it's just like cat memes and inspirational quotes and then you doing selfie videos and stuff. But I believe that hilarity is a high value. It's a high value for me. And so I believe I'm being in service when I share stupid idiot memes. I believe I'm in service when I share memes about healing that maybe most people won't get. I'm okay with being misunderstood, right? And that's something that's been a key tenet in my career as well, is that for a long time, I've just been okay with people misunderstanding me. Back in the day, I was deeply misunderstood as this enthusiastic, sort of annoying, overly positive person. But the truth is that that's really me. And if I play the long game, people ultimately realize, if they really get to know me, they realize, oh, she's just like that. And then I'm like, I have that, then that person is with me because they trust me. Because even when people are like, oh, I don't know, you're a little too positive, a little too enthusiastic, I didn't change myself in the face of that type of dissonance, you know?
I was going to ask you about being misunderstood, and you went straight into that, and whether you cared about being misunderstood.
It's not fun, right? It's not, but it's just like all the other things that are hard. You know what I mean? When we're faced with something that's really hard, that is actually our opportunity to show up with integrity, to learn a new part of ourselves that we have never accessed before, to learn skills that only this situation is forcing us to learn. You know what I mean? And again, that can sound very life coachy to some people. I get it. You might be listening to this and being like, can't with this Melanie Curtis positivity life coach thing, you know, and I get it. I was there too. I totally get it. When people used to talk about self-love, I was just like, oh God, stop. It's okay. It's totally okay. Like, people don't have to be on my same path. That's totally okay with me. And but it's taken a long time to do that. Like when I first started doing public speaking and Facebook Lives and stuff, I was tortured. I would sweat through my shirt and I would be so nervous and I would just hate it. But now I have hundreds, if not thousands of hours speaking publicly and doing it from this place of, I believe it's service if I show up as me. And so that is what I believe is a version of my leadership. Whether it works or not kind of doesn't matter. You know what I mean? That's really not the thing. If it does work, cool, but that's really not my goal, if that makes sense. It kind of is, but it isn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I've referenced this in past episodes of this podcast, that my greatest admiration for people are those that are willing to be vulnerable. I keep coming back to this. There's so much courage and strength in being vulnerable. And in a way, I feel like I used to look at Mel Curtis, that girl from back then, we remember her, as the gal that had it all figured out and was charging forward with a great attitude, and she was going to conquer whatever she put her mind to, and she did. But the Mel Curtis of today, I like Mel Curtis of today more, because Mel Curtis of today is vulnerable. And it seems to me that vulnerability has allowed you to, if you were charging before, now charging even harder. And you're doing big things. So kudos to you, my friend.
Oh, thank you, my friend. Well, and like I said, it might just appear that I'm charging, but really I'm just very intentional. I'm very intentional. What do I want to spend my time and my energy doing? Who do I want in my life? Who do I not want in my life? I'm very serious about that. One of the biggest compliments, Amy, who is my amazing friend, business partner with Highlight, she's like, one of the best compliments she ever gave me. I mean, she's given me plenty of good compliments, but she's like, Mel has amazing boundaries, and she's right. I do, and I think that's something that old Mel. I just didn't know how to do that. And I paid the price. I paid the price of not knowing how to do that. And it's not to say that I don't let people in, because I do. Like you said, it's like you can't connect deeply. You can't love deeply. You can't access, in my opinion, the best in life, which is really and truly being loving, like being deeply connected, being deeply seen and known by others and by yourself, if you're not willing to be vulnerable. Like, and that's the thing, going back to the plant medicine stuff, is like that it requires it, because you are brought to some places where you're kind of not forced into it, because like I said, the medicine, but it's a big deal. Being vulnerable is actually a huge strength. I believe in it. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
No doubt. This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. Let's talk about a moment in skydiving that caught my attention, and that was when you were doing the Project 19 vertical formation women's world record. One thing that I appreciated, again talking about vulnerability, is you put some videos out on the morning of those jumps, and we were sort of with you behind the scenes. Like, what we tend to see is the boldness, the exits, and the outcome. But we seldom get to see behind the curtain of how you are preparing yourself mentally to do something that is scary. Because these are no ordinary skydives. So I think there's some there's going to be some gain for those that are fearful, whether we're talking about a skydiving world record, as was Project 19, but just really doing anything that pushes you. You tell me about your process of that?
Yeah, totally. So funny. I laugh about this because we also did a bunch of like big media, which is another thing that I think is really quite scary. The interviewer, Nancy Chen for CBS Evening News, asked me the question. She's like, "Are you afraid doing this?" And I'm like, when wasn't I afraid? You know, like really, when wasn't I afraid? Because like, I know what we're doing. It's almost like when you're more experienced, you're like, holy fuck, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And this is the thing. I care deeply about mentoring jumpers, newer jumpers, most specifically, but any jumper that might be able to, I don't know, gain value from something I've experienced or shared or whatever. And why I say that is I think it's really important for any person that's on a pedestal or put on a pedestal, whether it's because I have my social media thing or I'm the Women's Skydiving Network executive director thing or for whatever reason I might be on a pedestal. I think it's important to constantly be humanizing the people who are on those pedestals. And I say that just meaning myself. So if I'm on a pedestal, it's very important to me to constantly be sharing what's human about my experience so that the person coming up behind me can go, oh, I feel that fear. Oh, that thought rolls through my head and tries to stop me. And it makes the stuff that I've achieved then possible for that person. So that's why it matters to me when I'm making videos for Project 19 and I'm doing the selfie thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm talking about, yeah, we're stoked to be here, stuff like that. I'm sharing the content of just what's going on. But it also matters to me to go, yeah, okay, we're about a week out and I'm breathing a lot even on this video because my brain is cycling in crazy amounts telling me not to do this. It's telling me, asking me, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And my whole body is activated in fear. You can almost hear it now just talking about it. It's not even happening. And my body is like going back there and reactivating. That's fucking nuts. But I think that's really important because then the people who are inevitably also feeling that, there's no freaking way. I mean, the people who are not feeling that either are wildly current, which is almost impossible to be when we're talking about world records because there's just not enough opportunities to be on skydives like that, or they are a little scary to me because they are not respecting what they're doing at the level at which they probably should be. You know what I mean? And so that's why it's so important to me to share that humanity, to share that process. So what do? I keep it very structured. I am very structured about a world record because I need to feel a sense of security wherever I can find it. Because the activity that I'm participating in is so out of my control, it's so intense and so fear-inducing that I need to take every single other piece of that process and both control it, but in a positive sense, while surrendering to not needing it, right? Like if I don't get to go to sleep by 9 p.m., I gotta be okay. And I can't let sleep anxiety roll me into freaking out the next morning. If the popcorn that I want to make and have in my little baggies, if it burns and I don't have another way to make the popcorn, I got to be okay that I'm going to be fine with the cucumber and the whatever other things that I have in my lunchbox. You know, so it sounds so stupid, But it's also, I put my helmet on at the same time. I sit in the airplane in the same way. I breathe deeply throughout the ride to altitude. There's all kinds of little details that make the process feel more secure and more controlled, so that when that door opens and I get in position to run off the tailgate of the Skyvan, that's when I know I've done everything that I can, and then I can drop into flow. That's it. That's it. What else are you going to do? There were plenty of times where I exited off the tailgate of the Skyvan and I was still feeling afraid, understandably. And then as I start to dive, I take that deep breath and I connect. Yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on about that too. Sorry, my friend, I'm really long-winded.
No, that's awesome. Let's talk about getting to that point on that world record. Was, I think, quite an achievement. Not because of the achievement itself, which was extraordinary, but knowing what I know, in that you took a couple of years off and you just weren't feeling it. Mm-hmm. And, it wasn't a sure thing that Mel Curtis was going to come back to skydiving. You'd already accomplished so much. So I remember that those few years you took off, and then we were speaking about you sort of baby stepping back in. And any comment or thought about that period and getting to where you are now?
Yeah, I absolutely could have been someone who just sort of did the slow fade, out of skydiving. I absolutely was not motivated to come back. I was starting to come out of the more challenging parts of sort of my life breakdown, which was a good thing. And I was looking for more community, which skydiving offers really beautifully, of course, is our beautiful community and social network. But I was still scared to jump. Like one day I drove to Jumptown and I was so scared. I was like, maybe this is going to be the day I'm going to jump and get in the air again. And I was just terrified. I was just fucking terrified. And then my main like packed into my container a little too tight, and I was just not feeling it. And then the winds picked up and I was just like, it's not today. And I didn't even attempt to jump for another probably 6 months or more after that. When I did come back, it was, again, very intentional, and it was just like anything that really scares you. You take it step by step, simple step by simple step. And that includes put my gear in the car, drive it up to Sonic, have him repack it, drive home, right? Plan with my friends that we're going to go to the drop zone, wake up early enough, get in my car, drive to the drop zone, right? Like these are all steps that are getting me closer to the thing that I was afraid of. At that point, it was jumping again. I was like, okay, I'm going to manifest and I'm going to do a, hop and pop and make it very simple, right? Nobody around me. And that's just how I approached getting back in the air. And once I was back in the air, everything came back. My body was like, I really know how to do this. I have, 10,000 skydives at that point or whatever I had. And so it came back very quickly in terms of, I understand that I'm capable in this area. But why I got back into skydiving in a bigger way is absolutely because of the purpose of Project 19 and Highlight. Like there's no way. I did not have the motivation to go to the drop zone. I did not want to go hang out at the drop zone and chit chat. I just wasn't in that place. I wanted to do other things. I love my life coaching business. I was writing and I was doing my Audible book and I was doing my mentor group online. I had touch points to skydiving, but I wasn't that motivated because I had done, like to your point, I had already done so much and I didn't have a goal. And I felt like there was more to my life that I could access. If I spent it all on skydiving, I just would never have other life experiences. And I write about this in my book, but why I went back is because of the purpose. Using skydiving as a vehicle to actually do something bigger than ourselves, to actually use it to help the greater world and the sport at large. That really was like, okay. Like I 100% came out of retirement to do Project 19. The last women's record that I did was in 2013.
Mel, you have been a life coach for a long time. I remember when you were going into it. In your experience in the breadth of being a life coach, what are the biggest obstacles have you found that are in the way of people accomplishing what they want to accomplish?
It so varies for every person. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of being a life coach, is that I get the great honor of getting to be with people in their challenges. You know what I mean? Like I get to be that safe container for them. I think just like me and everyone else, we want it to happen right away. We think that if we cognitively have an awareness of, say, a limiting thought that we've had or some self-defeating thought that has been driving the way we feel or the way that we act in relationship or the way that we act and ignore our goals or whatever, why we're staying in something that maybe feels toxic to us. A large part of that is it takes time, right? Like if we take on these limiting thoughts when we're a kid or wherever we are, when we're a younger person, we've got like 30, 40 years of that thought trenching neural pathways in our brain that is really intense. Like that's no joke. It's like I kind of describe it as like a truck driving in the mud, and the mud then it doesn't rain for a while and the mud hardens. That's the kind of like neural pathway that we're dealing with. Just because we know something and we have an awareness about ourselves, a self-awareness breakthrough, the iteration, the integration, the action and accountability after is where people think it should take less time. I think what people need to do, and I've had to do this countless times myself, is bring vast humility to that part of the process and to really learn how to accept that they are going to suck at that for a while. And that's part of it. That is all part of it. So instead of having that being a trigger for them feeling bad about themselves or thinking it's never going to happen, but that, like that's all part of it. So it's engaging that support team and having support in order to help you through that. But it's also recognizing and really deeply accepting that it might take a long time. It might not, but it almost certainly will.
I will say that you were my coach several years back, and I had this audacious goal of running the Chicago Marathon, and I couldn't do it. I didn't think I could do it. And I will say that our working together that year really unlocked a lot, and I did run that marathon. So I can say, for those listening, Mel Curtis is the real deal. Excellent listener.
Thank you, my friend.
You are, Mel. So
thank you.
I want to pretend to be a non-skydiver, and I want you to tell me a story of all the experiences that you've had in skydiving, all these years, all these countries you've been, all these cool places, all these great people that you've met. Tell me a story that makes me go, wow, that's cool.
Oh my gosh. Who knows? It's a literal impossible question, but I'll try. As long as people listening know that it's really just what I'm thinking of right now, and that it's really an impossible question. But what amazing gift that is. That's a really hard question to answer. How awesome is that, right? I think of a multitude of things. It's so hard to pick one. I think of the round in nationals where we were fields of green, and it was just like absolute flow state. And we got a perfect round. We tied the highest scoring team. We had hours and hours and hours of tunnel time. We were just kind of sucky but we got, silver. That was just an amazing jump. But like, really, I go to more the purposeful jumps. I think of landing in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, New York City, flying my parachute over Alva Belmont's mausoleum as a line of media stands there waiting to interview us. And I say that because that was an absolute impossibility. You're talking New York airspace. ATC can shut us down at any point. We have a content helicopter. We have our helicopter. We have 40-knot winds at like $4,000, but safe enough to jump lower to the ground. So we're spotting really, really far north of the target. This all for this mission that really matters. You want to do a great job for every person, every woman, girl, man, boy, whomever is looking to what we're doing and connecting it to that mission of going, equality matters. We need people to vote. We need people to care about their voice, care about how they're showing up in the world and society, and to care about how they're treating people around them, to think about what biases they might have around women or people of color or whatever marginalized group, and really contemplate those things. And so I think about that type of jump and I go, I got to land on this postage stamp. I got to jump out and hope I do it. And then you do, and you're just like, oh, it's kind of just another skydive, but I don't know, it's weird.
It's a perfect segue to the Highlight Pro Skydiving team. We all know about it. Mm. We all see it. We all see what you all are up to. What I don't understand or have clarity on is, what's the origin story? How did this team come to be? Whose idea was this? How did this happen? Basically,
when at the same time Project 19 and how can the WSN wants to fund projects in skydiving that are going to amplify the commemoration of the 100-year centennial of the 19th Amendment, right? So I got on a phone call with one of those people, and I was basically talking about just spitballing ideas. We came up with this idea to do one big demonstration jump in Nashville on August 18th, 2020, which was the day that the 19th Amendment was ratified. Tennessee was the last state. It got ratified by one vote. It's an amazing story. Harry Byrne, look it up. Totally amazing. That was the idea that we ran with, was, okay, cool. We're going to do this big demo in Centennial Park in Nashville, August 18th. Cool. And then basically working with the WSN is like some of these ideas just snowball. And so it just became really clear that having an all-female demonstration jump team could really make waves, could really secure big media and really try to amplify this message, which is why we ended up doing a whole series of jumps, Seneca Falls, Nashville, the Bronx. Like we did a whole series of things that served that mission. So anyway, Highlight was born from that, was just from doing a great job at that and then having people in leadership that were like, what else can we do? And people on the team that were like bringing ideas, what else can we do? And we luckily, miraculously had unbelievable support. It's a life-changing opportunity that we've all had to be a part of Highlight and a part of Project 19.
I would say that if there is legacy that we talk about in career, I feel the Highlight is going to be your greatest legacy. I've never known skydiving to be tied to social cause, and it is wonderful to see. Wonderful to see. Congratulations, because it's something that I think so many people admire. It's nice to see it. It's needed.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to add that it doesn't have to be only women. You know what I mean? Is that I just did a demo a week ago, and I was invited on this demo at the University of Virginia, where we flew in the numbers for the 3 students that were murdered last year. And it was a beautiful opening ceremony to honor them. I got to fly for Devin Chandler. Bobby Page, was flying for one of the other students, and George Grove, Tom Whalen was flying the UVA Strong. And so that's another version of it. I just want to open the narrative about Highlight, because it can be accessible to use skydiving as a vehicle for positive change. I'm not saying we're the only ones who are doing it, or nobody's ever done it. I'm sure other people have. I'm not trying to say that about our team. I'm more just trying to invite people who are contemplating how they might attach their storytelling about skydiving and there's a lot of possibility around that, around collaboration of ideas. I just feel like that's what's up. Like that demo that I just did was beautiful and wonderful. Same as how beautiful and wonderful it was to land in Woodlawn Cemetery right next to one of the main suffragists, of the women's suffrage movement.
Final question, Mel. I'm always intrigued by crossroads moments. You're faced with making a decision. I go this way or I go that way. And if you hadn't made the decision that you made at that critical point, you are not the Mel Curtis that we know today. Is there a crossroad moment that exists that comes to mind right away?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The crossroad moment is early on in my life. I had a really amazing boyfriend, college boyfriend. He was he is a wonderful person. And I absolutely could have stayed with him and likely had a very, very different life. We were in love, it was a beautiful, beautiful relationship. I could have absolutely seen myself getting married, having kids, and doing that version of life. And I think that's a wonderful choice. I really do. I have nothing against that choice. That is the clearest moment for me, where it's like I was just so in love with skydiving. I made the choice. I chose skydiving over him, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It's intense.
Yeah, and my brain is empathizing with that. That had to have been challenging. Mel, you are super inspiring, and I so appreciate the time you've given us. If someone is inspired and wants to work with you, or wants to learn more about not just life coaching, but also your virtual skydiving programs, you just share how people can connect with you?
Yeah, thank you, my friend. The skydiving coaching group that I do, and this is, I've been doing this online skydiving coaching group for younger jumpers or newer jumpers or any jumper that wants to learn from me specifically. I've been doing it over 8 years now, my friend. Every single Monday night we have a 30-minute call, and we have a private Facebook group and the whole thing. So I invite people to join us there. It's melaniecurtis.com/the-VSC, so Virtual Skydiving Center. I invite people to join my email list, melaniecurtis.com/join. Lots of good stuff on my email list. And of course, you'll get all the info about life coaching and stuff at my website for sure. And of course, if you're a podcast person, go ahead and listen to our podcast too, trustthejourney.today. Yeah, if you're an Audible person, listen to my book, How to Fly. It's on Audible. It's, I think, the best way to consume it is Audible, because I'm reading it.
I love it. Mel, thank you for your generosity of time. We went long, and I'm very grateful, and I'm hoping, and I think what will happen is that most everyone listening will have gotten something out of this conversation. I certainly did. Thank you, my friend.
I love you, my friend. Thank you so much.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies, Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.